Hey guys, what's up and welcome back to StarCraft 2 Strategy. Today we're going to be taking a look at a Terran strategy. Now in this particular replay, our Terran player here is Phoenix, and our Terran opponent is Red Archon. So right into Phoenix Vision again. This is a Terran strategy, and obviously as you can tell now it is a mirror matchup. Terran versus Terran. Been trying to cover a lot of mirror matchups lately, and so let's get right into it. What we're going to be looking at today is a variation of the 1-1-1 build, and no, I will not refer to it as the Destiny Cloud Fist, because the Destiny Cloud Fist kind of sounds like a sex move. I don't intend on calling that ever. 1-1-1, that'll suffice. So the 1-1-1 build, what does it do? It basically allows you to get a little bit of everything and be prepared for all possible scenarios. This is very effective in a mirror matchup, in a Terran versus Terran matchup, because you have the same capabilities as your opponent. It's not like you're playing against Protoss or Zerg, where they have different abilities and different units. You guys have the same thing, mirrored, obviously. Now, because of that, if you're able to be prepared for all possible scenarios or all possible units that your opponent throws at you, you're going to be in the best position. So in the 1-1-1, again, it's going to open up the most amount of avenues for you. Now, what we used to see a lot of in Terran versus Terran play, specifically, was you saw a lot of tank Viking, but with the recent nerf to the tanks, that last patch, they became far less effective against light units. So you're seeing a lot more play with Marines and Marauders, and we will be looking at that specifically. So starting off here, that opening build, pretty simple, beginning with the 10 Depot, 12 Barracks, 13 Refinery, and 16 Orbital Command. Very, very standard Terran opener. Economically, the most sound opener you can do. It pretty much puts you in the best position economically and allowing you to have some forces early on in the game. So once this barracks is up, we're gonna pump out our first Marine, turn this into a Orbital Command, and then go from there. That's when you're gonna really start to see variance in the builds. Moving on with our scout at this point, a little bit later than I typically like to. Although, truthfully, in a Terran versus Terran matchup, you don't have to worry too much about very, very early aggression, especially since they changed the barracks, forcing you to have a supply depot down before you can do it. You're not going to see many super early proxy barracks. Basically, it's very unlikely that they're going to have a barracks in your base before you have your barracks up. So as you can see here, we are actually getting a tech lab. After that first Marine is out, going to be getting a tech lab here in the barracks. Also going to be coming down with this second Refinery. Now that went down at 16 supply while that Orbital Command was building very, very early. The thing to note in going for this 1-1-1 build, you're going to need a lot of gas. The factory and the Starport, all units coming out of that, pretty gas intensive for the most part, except for the Hellion. But units that you're likely to be getting out of the factory and the Starport, such as the Banshee, Viking, Medevac, and the siege tank, they're all very gas intensive. So getting the second Refinery very early, going to be pretty crucial. The factory coming down right now, and that's at about 20 supply. So as you can see, finally just finding our opponent here. Moved in, saw 2 Marines. Pretty standard, not much info coming out of that. Now because of this, because it's going to be hard to push into his base, rather than wasting energy on a scan, we're actually going to use our first 50 Vespian. Again, another reason we got this really early Refinery, because we are going to be coming out with a Reaper in the very beginning. This is going to allow us to get some really good scouting information. It's going to allow us to move into his base and see precisely what he is going for. So far, just working on the SCVs, working on the economy, trying to move into his base and see what's going on. Now, we were going to try to push forward, but as you can see, there are some Marines there. You don't want to lose the Reaper. If you don't think you can push into his base early on without losing him, then go ahead and pull him back. And another neat trick here is make him divert his forces by moving in with the Reaper, and then send an SCV in. We did get a full scout of his base. We saw precisely what was going on. That was a factory going down, so we know there wasn't a 2 or 3 barracks build coming, so we don't have to really worry about that. Now, as you can see here, this factory is done building. We went ahead and switched it with the tech lab that we had our barracks on, putting a reactor on the current barracks, and then also building a starport. So as you can see, this is specifically the 1-1-1. We have a barracks, factory, and starport coming out. Now with this factory here, we are going to want to get an early siege tank. This is going to help a lot against early aggression from Marines and our Marauders. Obviously, can also take care of this Hellion. Hellion drops, pretty popular, pretty standard stuff. Nothing too crazy there. Still haven't seen much in his base recently. Going to move in with the Reaper, try to get some additional information. We're seeing a lot of Marines. A lot of times if you see a ton of Marines like this, you can expect them to be going Banshees, because typically when a Terran player goes for that 1-1-1 build and they're going straight for Banshee, a lot of time they'll get a lot of early Marines for early defense. So when we moved in, We saw a ton of Marines. Also seeing the Starport with the tech lab, we can be reasonably sure that we're going to be seeing Banshees. So now that the Starport's up, going to be coming out with some Vikings in order to deal with that. Also dropping this engineering bay. This is of course going to allow us to upgrade our units, but more importantly, this is going to allow us to get a couple turrets. And maybe just one in the main line, and once we finally expand, we're going to be getting one there. And here's the other great thing about this 1-1-1 build. Being prepared for everything, and with good scouting, with our Reaper here, we're going to be able to pretty safely expand pretty early. So we're dropping this command center here, started building that there at 31 supply. So yeah, I mean, this is pretty much the setup that we need. It's going to allow us to get pretty much a little bit of everything and see exactly what's going on. Now, in moving in with this Viking here, we did see that he had a Banshee on the board that was pushed back. So now we know precisely what's happening. Going to be getting a second Viking to deal with those Banshees. And again, now that we're going to be getting these turrets down, we're going to be pretty safe. Something to keep in mind too, just because a turret may not be in range of a Banshee, it still detects them. The detection range is further than the actual firing range on a turret. So having these Vikings and having Marines nearby, if the turret's not hitting, it doesn't necessarily mean you're not going to be able to see and take out that Banshee. So again, something to keep in mind. And then of course you do have the option of cloak. You do have the option of scans to detect that cloak. So he's moving in at this point with the Banshee and cloaking, took out that turret, but luckily we're going to see here, not in the firing range, but still within the detection range, and that's why we were able to shoot him. Now at this point he is fully out of that range, so we're going to want to use a scan to take down these Banshees. We do have both of them right here. If you ever get in an optimal position like this where you have two cloak Banshees relatively close, that's a good time to use a scan. So basically what we want to do is we just want to mass up some forces, getting these siege tanks, getting out these Marines, and then of course we're getting out those Vikings as well to fend off those early Banshees. Now that we have a pretty solid Banshee defense and these two Vikings, we're going to start being aggressive, looking to do some dropping here. We did get a medevac after those first two Banshees, and then going to be tech switching into Banshees ourselves. That's one of the great opportunities. Again, this type of build allows you to do pretty much a little bit of everything. As soon as we were done producing those two early Vikings and this dropship, we're dropping down that tech lab and going to be going into Banshees ourselves, hopefully to try to catch him by surprise, because we haven't gotten Banshees thus far, so he may be in the mindset that, well, he hasn't gotten Banshees yet, maybe he won't get Banshees at all. But there's no reason for you to neglect that when you have the opportunity only one tech lab away, essentially. So as you can see here, we have gotten this expansion down, have this turret up for some Banshee defense and detection. In our base, pretty solid defense thus far. We do have these siege tanks going to be coming up with this siege mode as well. It's not super necessary early on, because when we were scouting our opponent, we saw that they weren't coming out with any early pushes. They actually only had one barracks at the time we scouted them, and they were going for those fast Banshees. So because of that, getting that siege mode super early, not necessary. If you don't have a bio push coming from your opponent, if it doesn't look like your opponent's going to be pushing out with Marines and Marauders, there's no reason to get that siege tech really early. But you do want those tanks for an eventual push, definitely. So definitely still want to get those, and that siege tech can come after. So as you can see here, coming out with this Banshee, you're going to try to do some harassment with that once it's up, and then transitioning into these Marines and Marauders. Now again, as I mentioned earlier, Marines and Marauders much more effective now than they used to be in Terran vs. Terran. We can see in the scan here that he in fact is doing a switch himself. Looks like he intends on getting some Vikings in preparation for those Banshees, but unfortunately isn't going to be quite enough time for him to do that. So back to this Marine and Marauder, these are much more effective now, again, because of that siege tank nerf. Siege tanks are not nearly as strong against light units as they used to be. They got a overall damage decrease in the normal damage, but their damage and armor went up. So the total damage stayed the same, but again, that damage versus light, that base damage isn't nearly as strong anymore. So again, we can do this bio build and feel pretty safe about it, even if he has some siege tanks. I'm going to be pushing out at this point. Now, because he is really far behind, he went for that really fast Banshee tech. He went for a really fast Banshee, and he also went for a really fast cloak. Since we were able to fend that off with just a couple Vikings and a couple of turrets, and our base army was pretty strong that we'd been working on the entire time with these Marines and these siege tanks, as far as ground forces are concerned, you're in a stronger position than your opponent who goes straight for Banshee tech, and that's precisely why we didn't do it ourselves. We just went with the basic army of Marines, got some siege tanks, and then got some Vikings to fend off those Banshees. And again, because of that Vespian investment from your opponent, if you can instead spend your resources on these early ground forces, and then once you fend off those Banshees, push out, you're going to be in a very strong spot. And that's precisely what we're going to be seeing here. So as you can see, moving forward with these siege tanks, Marines, that one Marauder, medevac, And again, just a little bit of everything, and this is the versatility that that 1-1-1 build allows you to have. Pushing up on his expansion, the really key thing in this type of matchup is if you can take out your opponent's expansion, it pretty much means that you're going to solidify a victory for yourself, because they're going to be so far behind if you do manage to take it out. As you can see, we had no problem taking out their tanks there. And once again, their ground forces are lacking simply because they vested so much on those early Banshees. And he does in fact go ahead and call a good game. So let's just go over that build order one more time here. Beginning with that 10 supply depot, then a 12 barracks and 13 refinery, 16 orbital command. Very, very standard in terms of opening. Got that very early refinery as well. This was used to help offset getting that early Reaper that we did. Then also, of course, teching up to this factory in Starport. We're going to need a lot of SP and gas. 28 supply, or I'm sorry, 20 supply, that's when we get our factory, and then at 28 supply we saw our Starport going down. And again, going for that 1-1-1, the Barracks, factory, and Starport initially as your 3 first production buildings, that allows you to have a lot of options. It allows you to open up a lot of avenues for yourself. 31 supply coming out with that fast expansion, and then also at 34 supply we dropped that engineering bay because we did see Banshees on the way. Something else to note again, in neglecting for going for that really fast Banshee and instead getting Vikings as Banshee defense, pushing your other resources into those siege tanks and the biomix, those Marines and Marauders for your ground forces. If you're able to fend off those early Banshees and you can push out after that with your ground force, you're going to be far ahead of your opponent, and you're definitely going to be in a really good spot. And then another note is, of course, getting that early Reaper. That's not a Reaper, but we had a Reaper, and we used that for scouting, and that's really going to help you figure out what your opponent's getting without having to waste the energy for a scan when you could rather be using it on a mule. So once again, guys, this has been Force StarCraft 2 Strategy. If you guys like our videos and you like what we're doing here, please do go ahead and subscribe to our channel. Keep watching and keep owning, guys. Instead of your Marines. So that allows your Marines to freely shoot without being damaged. So that's the other purpose of bringing the SCVs. So as you can see, pushing forward, kind of an all-in attack here. Now, what you do have to realize and look for is banelings. You have to be very scared of banelings at this point. And we were able to push forward comfortably because when we scanned, we saw a roach warren and not a baneling's nest.